Hello, YouTube friends. I'm gonna see if I can do this little noodle. I've been noodling again, and I'm working in uncertainty as Kabbalah. My study in Kabbalah has revealed that a very elegant line in the Song of Songs, translated Kabbalistically, my peace is uncertainty. There is some truth in that, and truth I always use as a kind of indicator of uncertainty. Truth is uncertainty. Uncertainty is truth. All right, let me get my mind into this. I'm going to try to do this explanation, quick explanation, thoughts, continuing thoughts of being able to live in both worlds, let's say materium and the spiritual side of us. We are not just physical beings, we are also spiritual beings. So the ability to live in both worlds simultaneously, what I'm going to suggest is it's a very difficult thing to do as material, as bags of blood or whatever you want to call it, meat suits, with a spirit, something that is very nebulous from the point of view of the materium. The materium continuously pushes us towards materium. When we contact the final frontier, or that inner space, I'm not talking about organs and things functioning within us. I'm talking inner space that would be part of the world that I will call the spirit part of us. And how do we begin to exist in the spirit part of the world, while we are as physical beings, as we continue to be physical beings? The effort to live on the spiritual level plane in our life is actually, in my mind, very important to exercise, to give us a head start. As Makoski has said, to empty or leave the cave, it needs to be practiced before we get to that point. So our ability to exist as a spirit with a physical body, obviously, until we die, whatever that transition might mean, it's actually an important exercise to each person for themselves discover what it means to be closer in communion, in touch with the part of us that is not materium or the physical world. That's how I'm seeing it these days. My effort to be living within the kingdom of heaven, which is the inner world. I still love that quote, the rabbi's quote, the kingdom of heaven is within. The ability for each person to live on a more consistent level, for me to be able to consistently be engaged with what we understand to be spiritual. And this, of course, is a word that has many interpretations. Each person will look at this in their own way. But I think it's clear that, or we would all agree, that we are physical beings. And if that's all there is, in a way, there's no point to communicate other than to satisfy that physical existence. In other words, my interest to communicate with anyone or anything, what appears to be outside of myself, is predicated on believing in or understanding or knowing that part of me that is called spirit. So what I'm saying, what I am intuiting in a sense, is how to interpret the idea, okay, the idea of transitioning from a physical entity to a completely, totally, 100% spiritual entity, which is the way I think about this. The transition is what is understood to be death. When we stop using this vehicle, this physical vehicle, we begin in some form a transition, and who knows what that involves, what type of a dimension opens up when we transition. And of course, the issue, as Howdy McCoskey has brought up, Buddhists have brought up, of becoming cyclical in our return to a physical world. So we transition from what we feel like is primarily a physical materium, matter world to a spiritual world when we die, and vice versa. So am I aware in that other dimension that there is also a physical component to me? Would that spirit part of me, which has left this body in the next dimension, understand that there is a physical dimension potential to my existence? Or is it purely spiritual without a recognition of the physical? And what part does, or would, this is speculation, would a physical, an understanding of the materium affect my existence as pure spirit? And the speculation would be, again, that my understanding of this experience is that it is fundamentally a horrible shit show. It's a dog-eat-dog world, literally. Like each creature eats other creatures. In the animal kingdom, in the vegetable kingdom, everything seems to be eating each other. Although I think vegetables, I think they're rather non-aggressive, except for maybe a Venus flytrap. I don't know how that would work, that the vegetable kingdom is much less prone or susceptible to the abuse that I'm talking about when I'm thinking about the world that we exist in, the material world that we exist in, which is without a doubt a rather unpleasant, generally speaking, an unpleasant experience, even though we are very much seduced or even coerced into feeling like, oh, there's much to live for in this materium. And it all seems to always carry with it some kind of version of a anxiety, suffering, whatever you want to call it. There's always this component, this element of something always just feels like a struggle, is something is difficult for the materium, as the materium itself is made to be a problem. So my noodling here is the part of me that is spirit. Is it possible to separate myself from this experience of shit show propagated from outside and reinforced with my own thought maker? My thought machine is compliant with the world that has been taught to me. I've been schooled for my thought maker to comply with the materium the way I experience it. So it's also my responsibility, my doing, in a sense, of creating this shit show every day in some form or other. Voluntarily, involuntarily, it's just how it works. So my point about this is to be able to live more on what is understood to be our spiritual dimension, which is not materium. It's difficult to it's difficult to imagine and articulate because everything we experience is materium. And what is materium? And it has been elegantly exposed, even with what the white coats, the way they approach it, have, probably with people in this have good intention, that have expressed the fact, the more you go into materium, the less there is, right? That as we go deeper and deeper into the nature of matter, it appears to disappear. It appears to disappear. So that, uh, again, it's a wonderful conundrum, anomaly that doesn't make sense, but in another way, if we are more of a spiritual nature, it'll make total sense. That space that opens up into the possibility. All possible possibilities open up, even for the white coats, as we descend more and more into the depth, the minuteness, that miniature space, that smallness of everything is actually infinite in a certain way. It's not like something you hit and you kind of end at the origin of something that's really infinitely solid. It doesn't seem to work that way. It's infinitely not there. I mean, people who've been listening to me, you're kind of seeing my progression toward thinking in these terms, especially since much of my life has been concerned with conjuring through the creative process imagery that suggests or even represents in some form or other this dimension, the spiritual dimension, something the sissies and dresses, I forget his name, Michael Fazio, fascinating fellow. I think he's living in the Philippines now. He got pissed off with me and he doesn't talk to me anymore. We had communication. He referred to the sissies and dresses, the Catholic with their robes and everything. What these sissies and dresses and all their fancy hatted complementary religious types have always been whatever they can do to take us down their spiritual path, whether it's non-denominational swamis, the whole lot of them are always attempting to corner the market on this thing, this what is understood, what I'm using right now, the word spiritual. So it ultimately, in my experience, becomes something very personal, and maybe each individual person, like if there is so many millions, billions of us, there is specifically, it is related specifically to each person, whatever that may mean, because my communication, my ability to communicate an idea is primarily based on interpretation. So whenever I say anything, I make a sound, whether it's verbal or musical or vibrations that have to do with painting. Those are all going to be interpreted by you, which is the essence of spiritual. It is highly individual from the point of view where physical beings, we seem to be containers in some way that also contain these thoughts, these ideas, and they're very specific always to me, to us individually. And to globalize it, to make it into a universal experience is not helpful. I don't see it as helpful. I think it needs to be very personal, always. It doesn't mean I can't attempt to communicate what it is, this essence, this understanding I have that is non-material, but again, it becomes interpretive. Like, when people get really fixated on the truth in any kind of literature, whether it's the Bible or the Quran or anything, when people get fixated on determining the truth from something, uh, they're in the shitter. They're in hot water because it doesn't work. Because it's all very personal. There is no universal truth in that sense. It's all very personal. And in that way, it is universal because it's personal. Again, another anomaly. It doesn't make sense, right? That the universal truth is that there is no universal truth. I don't know if this stimulates, like as I'm speaking, does it resonate? Does it create a sense of what I'm hoping is through my thought machine, wherever these thoughts come from, by the way, I haven't practiced any of this. It's just like, you know, what is that literature, that stream of consciousness, that sort of Joycean approach to imagination, to allowing a thing to flow, to be what it wants to be, is really what I'm practicing when I do my videos. I mean, there's a certain impetus to begin with, but I get inspired, I get sort of motivated, I suppose, to address certain things. And actually today, or in the last couple of days, what I've noticed is what I would like to call a ripple in the continuum of our consciousness. A ripple on the ocean of consciousness has occurred. A small ripple has occurred. I paid attention to it. I took notice. There has always been this debate in the cyber Ethereum, the YouTubes and whatever you want, that cyber debate that happens on whether the reality that we live in terms of a ball, or is it flat, or is it something else. There has been a quite, let me say, I think it's a small, it's not a large group, relatively speaking, because most people don't give a shit. Most people don't think about any of this stuff. Most people just accept whatever it is given to them. They eat it like pablum. You know, somebody says, well, you know, here's a ball. And when we go to school, the first thing we see is the ball on the desk of the teacher and everything. And we can never get away from the ball. Why do they do that? Why do they do that? Especially when a lot of the so-called science around it is not determined. It's very clearly not determined. There are so many unanswered questions about the science of what is being proposed. So anyway, the ripple I have perceived is there was an experiment of several people finally being allowed for $35,000 each, apparently, to go down to Antarctica and be witness to a magnificent experience of what it was to see if there is a 24-hour sun, which supposedly negates the idea that the Earth is flat. Yeah, I don't know what the nature of a round is. Is it flat? Is it oval? Is it whatever? Is it a dome? Is it, you know, is the sun reflecting off the dome, which is why you see it down there? I mean, there are many interpretations of what we see, but to focus in on one particular interpretation when there is clearly, like I say, truth is the most slippery target that you're ever going to hit. And when you go for an experiment and you're basically just observing something, and you walk away from that experience and interpret what you saw in your way, well, that's just one way of interpreting something and giving it an explanation. Anyway, what they did is a bunch of people went down to Antarctica to prove that we live on a sphere, on a ball. And without addressing any of the anomalies connected, associated with living on this ball, some very high-profile flat earthers changed their mind. Now, this obviously is a psyop. People, it's a psyop. People are set up, willingly or unwittingly, are within this realm of controversy. And it always shows me that there is something really wrong when it becomes vicious and vulgar, or ridiculing The way people are ridiculed for asking questions. Why do you need to ridicule someone? If they're stupid, help them out and become smart rather than ridiculing them, because ridicule never works. Ridicule just makes a person remove themselves into their shell of their own being. They withdraw like a shell, like a turtle into a shell. So I'm already aware that this is a psyop. It's a controlled, manipulated event where people are up against each other trying to kick the shit out of each other rather than saying, I think I was wrong. And then kind of take it easy. Take it easy. It's like, look at the situation and all right, you have an observation about the sun, apparently, never seems, keeps circling around the Antarctic pole or whatever. And all right, so you've had this observation. Let's see what we can do with this. How do we understand this? And I know, people, for a fact, it's not possible on a ball to have a pressurized system. This is science 101. When a pressurized system comes into contact with a vacuum, the vacuum will suck that pressurized system into its vacuum and equalize. It's just how it works. It has never been without any kind of containment around a pressurized system for it to be able to exist in the vacuum. It doesn't work. So fine, call it a sphere or whatever, but you can't rely on gravity, of course, which is gravitational theory. It's a theory because it's never been replicated in a controlled experiment. Apparently, this is what science needs: controlled, verifiable, repeatable experiments. So gravity is an interesting theory, but that's all it is. And to say that gravity holds on to the little molecules of air all around the globe is like, please, it doesn't work. So for there to be such a vociferous nastiness on people finally having been allowed, which is also interesting, for $35,000 apparently it costs, well, why is it so expensive? Why has this always been such a contested area, Antarctica? To protect the seals, I know. I forgot. I'm sorry. Yeah, I forgot. Got to protect those seals down there. We kick the shit out of everything else, but oh no, we're going to protect the seals, or not seals, the penguins forever. So this ripple has occurred in the continuum of a small portion of the population, but a significant, important portion of the population, because they communicate with people of spirit, all right? When you're contrarian or when you're questioning, you're actually existing, as I say, much more in that spirit part of ourselves. It's just the nature of how we function, because it's abstract. It's an abstract. When I say abstract, it's non-material. Abstract is like in art, it's a little different. Abstract is like you have real things like paint literally just representing itself. That's what abstraction is. You're not trying to reproduce something recognizable to ourselves in the world. It's abstraction is literally where paint represents itself. I'm talking about painting now, anything. So there is no such thing as abstract in the real world because it always represents itself, so it's real. However, in our mind, we have the ability to, our thought machine, wherever it exists, has the ability to project ourselves through imagination into an experience that is not necessarily all physical. So this debate, flat ball, is crucial on the level of people who are engaged in this, in a true sense engaged in this, are dwelling much more in that spiritual realm. And it's being challenged and potentially ridiculed and destroyed because we are encouraged to accept consensual views. The pressure is enormous to continue on a path of the consensual. So I'll leave it there. My point, that the emotional entanglements based on abstractions, especially when they become vulgar and vicious, or the way they're ridiculing each other now and calling each other names, indicates to me a shift. And it's a shift in making sure that anyone that wants to stay in more in that spiritual dimension as the best way they can, and I believe that to be a higher part of ourselves, not just trapped in this bag of blood, whatever it dictates, whether it's mostly suffering. I mean, we do have certain pleasures, I suppose, but they're fleeting. And it's even said that as soon as we're born, we age, and we go toward that kind of progressive deterioration, if you want. Very likely connected to our thought machines, what our thought machines are producing and complying with. And well, I wouldn't be surprised if there are some individuals, we probably would never know about them, who have been able to escape the event horizon of this materium by altering their thought machine into a much deeper spiritual realm that eventually we all transition when we die. And you can believe whatever you want, nothing isn't possible to imagine, because all we've been able to do is live in something. So nothing is not something. Nothing is unimaginable. It's like infinity. It doesn't work. So why even postulate that there is nothing when we die? It doesn't work. Like mentally, it doesn't work. You're going to blow your circuits on that one. But you can just walk away and say, oh, there's nothing. Well, yeah, that's triviality. That's like thoughts don't mean anything. It's sort of like, on the one hand, it's really important. Yeah, you have your opinion. But then on the other hand, you can just walk away. It's like, it doesn't make sense. Either you have an opinion, which is something, and then to say there's nothing, I don't know. Okay, I've said enough about that. So anyway, there's a ripple in the continuum, and I think it is, oh yeah, my last point I'd like to make is that I think it's moving toward some kind of an event that I think will separate the men from the boys, will create a real schism in the population. I wouldn't even be surprised that it's going to be very overwhelming for people to deal with whatever is coming towards us. Literally, people will keel over and die from the shock. That's what I think. I don't know if I'm susceptible still to being shocked about how we're manipulated to the point where the manipulation feels real, how our thought machine can just accept something. I'm working on myself to transition more into that spiritual realm, not to be caught in the headlights of what I believe is coming, which is to drive us away from the spirit part of us into the physical world. And the physical world is, I would say, 90% abusive, vulgar, nasty, ridiculing, whatever you want to call it. When people express themselves on a level of abuse and creating suffering, we know we're on the wrong track, always. So it can't be clouded in a debate. It can't be clouded, oh, I'm right, you're wrong. Here's truth, here's lie. It doesn't work that way. What works is kindness, generosity, openness. All those aspects in a discussion is what it's about. It's not about arriving at a truth. It's a way of being able to communicate without indulging in creating suffering. And the system, the world that we are a part of, that our thought machine recreates every day when we do this is to keep us away from inner space, the final frontier, that part in us that is not material. So, okay, I'll leave it there. The debate on flat or ball kind of got me noodling on all of this, and something is going to happen that will force the issue, probably sooner than later. I don't know. Figuring out the timing on stuff is always a difficult thing. Is it in 10 years? Is it in one day? I don't know. But this certainly has got my attention on how these two camps are going at each other now. And people like myself who take uh, the contrarian approach, not just having the truth of something, but being open about the possibility when I'm not sure. I am sure that the bastards are trying to keep us on a path. I am sure about that. I guess that would be a truth. That on this dimension, there's always going to be the manipulators who want to make sure that we don't step out of line, we stay on the reservation, and we keep our mouths shut for the most part. And they love people getting vulgar and vicious with each other. This is the other thing. It's like this is the 101 of discontent. You know, it's like when one person exemplifies the nature of this reality through the way they can be nasty, vulgar, angry, abusive, all that kind of stuff. I've experienced this myself. It feels terrible. It feels terrible now. I feel really bad when those kind of emotions come up in me. Anyway. Becoming more comfortable, I don't know if comfortable is the right word, but becoming more active towards the spiritual side of ourselves, whichever way each person does that, is very important now, because we're driven into the other camp. We're being driven in the other camp. But always have been, but even more so now, I think.